From features that quite literally serve no purpose to niche mechanics that I think could be made infinitely better, here are 26 useless DBD features and some ideas to make them actually relevant. Number 1, the props system. Most of you probably don't even know that this exists. At the end of each match, you're able to basically give props to any of the players in the game, but it's literally hidden behind the report a player screen, so nobody really goes there. I feel like there's so much more that we could do with this feature. The simplest solution would be for it to give blood points to whoever you give props to, and obviously this wouldn't work for people that are in your party, but they could also treat it kind of like the reputation system in Rainbow Six Siege, or even the card system from Overwatch. There's so much space in the endgame screen that you can make the props show up there, and maybe the more props you get, the higher reputational standard you have. In the system that Rainbow Six Siege has, stuff like griefing or throwing or text chat abuse and stuff like that can actually lower your reputation score, which will limit your rewards and limit the amount of game modes that you can play. So in that case, you can't play ranked, for example. But I don't know how well that system would work in DBD because a lot of players just find certain game mechanics to be toxic, like camping or slugging. So instead, I think this prop system for DBD could increase your reputation, which could give you better rewards, such as more blood points or more iridescent shards, but you can't lose more than the normal reputation and start having worse rewards. Does that make sense? I think this would help make it so that people that have a fun match can provide you with a slight bonus for being nice or for playing in a fun manner, but you don't lose anything for not being given props. I think this would incentivize better community overall. Even if it's not by much, it's still something. Like, there are plenty of games where I would happily give someone props if it actually did something. Number 2, the did you have fun system. Again, a lot of you probably don't even know this exists. After each match, there was a little thing on the top that said, did you have fun? And you can mark it from 1 to 5. I really don't think that this does anything. It may be data that behavior is getting on the back end, but I really feel like it's such bad data. Like, it's not going to be helpful at all. So I'd like to rework this into a persistent lobby option where all 5 players can vote to rematch and stay in the same lobby if they had a good time. I genuinely think this would be a huge benefit to the game because it can create friendly rivalries or keep people that play in an interesting and fun way together. But then those people who enjoy playing competitively could stay in the lobbies and keep trying to beat each other. I think there's so much good that could come out of persistent lobbies, and maybe they can make it to like a cap of 3 persistent lobbies just to avoid like exploiting/farming. But I think this would be a super interesting idea to A, not only have to not wait in another queue, but B, get to play against the same person again and again. Obviously, I think that the killer should be able to switch killers if they're doing this persistent lobby option, because maybe they want to try something new to try to beat this 4-man Survivor Threads, for example. But overall, I think this would be a super interesting thing, and there's so many other games that have persistent lobbies, and it makes it so much more kind of community driven, if that makes sense. Number 3, the Shrine of Secrets. I have thousands of hours on this game, and I have not used the Shrine of Secrets a single time. Although nowadays it's a lot more useful for new players because there's so many perks in the game, I still think that if you're going to commit to the game and eventually unlock every character, you may as well just save the shards to actually buy the characters so you're not wasting additional shards. However, it's useful for those people that don't want to buy a character but still want to get their perks. I do think the Shrine of Secrets needs a little bit of a quality of life feature, and that is to do a video showcase of the perks being used. I know this would take a lot of work because there are so many perks in this game, but sometimes the descriptions of the perks are a little bit confusing, and I'm sure there are so many people, especially content creators, that would happily volunteer to get a video of these perks being used. Like, I know I would do that. I would do that for completely free. I think this would be a great benefit to newer players because a lot of times people learn by watching the perk being used rather than just reading a really long description of it. Especially if, for example, they don't know status effects. So like, say there's a perk that applies Oblivious to the survivor, then you could visibly show that the survivor can no longer hear the terror radius. Plus, we've gotten to the point where there's so many perks that I think only 4 perks in the Shrine of Secrets, it just doesn't cut it anymore. I think they have to up that by like maybe 2 or 3 times. Not to the point where it looks like a Fortnite item shop, but enough to give people more of a chance to get what they want. Number 4, levels and devotion. Now, currently as it stands, literally the only reason that level and devotion exists is to show you how long that you've played. But I just don't feel like that's cool enough. Like, there's so much more that we could do with it. And here's my proposal. Every time that you get a devotion level, you get 1 single devotion point, and you can use your devotion points on an exclusive devotion shop, which has exclusive skins, player banners, icons, and then 2 other new cosmetic types, which would be item cosmetics, similar to how like the Halloween event gives you Halloween medkits or whatever. And also you could have name effects. So for example, in the endgame screen, you could have your name glowing gold or something. And also behavior could make it so that the shop prices for skins and stuff are like 5 devotion points. So you really have to commit to get them, so they're super exclusive. I think this would be a really interesting way to reward players who play your game a lot. And speaking of playing your game a lot, number 5 is P100. I could not have a useless DBD features without mentioning P100. There is quite literally no point in reaching Prestige 100 besides the bragging benefits. So as everybody has asked for, we need an exclusive cosmetic, an exclusive exclusive player banner/icon, or even just an animated player portrait for reaching P100. I think it's such a big feat to spend so many blood points on one single character to just not be rewarded for it at all. Even if the background of the player portrait was just animated to be a little bit more interesting, then it would feel more like you actually accomplished something rather than just getting that little red P100 PNG. And then obviously people would really appreciate having an exclusive P100 cosmetic for that character, kind of like how you get the prestige bloody cosmetics. They could even do something where it's like the legacy skins from back in the day, but kind of different. I just think they need to reward you somehow, and maybe if they reworked the devotion thing to the devotion shop like we just talked about, they could just have you get an extra devotion point when you reach P100 and then have the exclusive cosmetic skins in there. There's so much opportunity to reward your players for spending this much time on your game, and I think having extra progression and extra rewards like this will be really beneficial. Number 6, custom game settings. Right now, the custom game settings are so limited. They've gotten a tiny bit better over the past few years because now you can like add bots, add bot loadouts, and disable idle crows and stuff, but I think we could take this a step further to make custom games actually much more useful. Here are a ton of things I thought of in like 5 seconds that could make custom games become really interesting. The first one is add an ability to put a map seed. If you don't know what a seed is, think of it kind of like a QR code that the game scans, and then that randomly generates the layout for that map. Because obviously every map in DBD has a bunch of randomly generated areas. So for example, one tile could be a TL, but then the next game that tile might be a long wall. However, if you're able to put a specific seed, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, then anybody that ever puts in that seed will have the exact same map with the exact same tiles in each location. This would make it so much better to have like balanced matches, especially for like comp DBD, or if you're doing certain events or certain like game shows and stuff where you need the maps to be exactly the same to have the most fair and competitive balance. And then I also have a ton of other ideas, such as changing the number of generators required to escape, toggling whether or not the hatch can spawn, blacklisting certain rarities of items or offerings or add-ons, having a toggle to prevent repeated perks and items. I know this is one of the rules in some DBD tournaments where survivors can only use one perk among the entire team. So for example, if one person is using DS, then another person cannot use DS anymore and has to use something else. An option to play limited time event modes. I understand that behavior is a business and LTMs are meant to bring people in with FOMO, but I just can't see a world in which not having these LTMs in custom games would be detrimental. If anything, it'd be beneficial because people are actually spending time on the thing you put dev time into. Like My Little Oni never came back, but people may want to play that still. You could also do interesting things like killer power cooldown multipliers, or base killer speed multiplier, or survivor speed multiplier, or gen repair speed multiplier, healing speed, etc. So people could play the game on like 200% speed. It would just be silly, goofy things that probably wouldn't be that difficult to implement because you're just changing a couple variables here and there, but would provide so much more replay value in the custom game settings. And you could also do things like toggling bloodlust, or toggling the terror radius, or toggling the red stain, or even having a map pool selector. So for example, if you wanted to do only Autohaven and Macmillan maps, then you could just select all of those and then have it randomly spin a map within the ones you selected rather than just choosing a single map. You could blacklist certain killers. So if you want the killer to be able to choose from a certain selection of killers, then they can do that. Or even a toggle to allow cosmetics. I know some DBD events and tournaments would want to make it as simple as possible to understand. So disabling cosmetics would make it easy to understand what the killer is, for example, like the Trapper bear skin. Like some new players might not know who that is, but if they see Trapper, they'll know exactly who that is. And also an option to disable the HUD. Please make this a thing. Even if it's just in the normal game settings, please make this a thing. It would help so much for content creation. But yeah, I feel like there's so much potential that they could do in custom game settings to make it really interesting. Like look at Overwatch custom game settings that you can completely change how the game is played. And it would make people have a lot more fun because they can just do some silly stuff with their friends if they're having a bunch of bad games in a row and still want to play DBD but just kind of want to chill. Number 7, the sacrificial ward. Low key, I feel like this offering was kind of pointless to begin with. It basically prevented map offerings from working, but it was such a gamble to run this because a lot of people didn't even use map offerings. So most of the time the sacrificial ward wouldn't even do anything. And now that map offerings were nerfed to only give you a really tiny chance to go to that map, I feel like this is a completely useless offering. So here's my proposal. Split the sacrificial ward into 2 different map offerings. One of them that gives you a 50% higher chance of rolling an indoor map, and one that gives you a 50% chance of rolling an outdoor map. I think this is like the perfect middle ground to still allow you to kind of play into a specific play style. So for example, if you're playing Scratch Mirror Myers or you're playing a stealth killer or something, you could use the one that gives you a higher chance of rolling an indoor map. It's not guaranteed, but at least you have a higher chance, which will let you use your ability more often. Or if you're playing someone like Hillbilly or like Blight or something that really benefits being on an outdoor map, you could do the other one. I think this would be a really interesting interesting way to kind of bring back map offerings without making them for a specific map. You could even split it up into 2 more different offerings where one of them gives you a higher chance of going to a smaller map and the other one gives you a higher chance of going to a bigger map. I feel like this would be a super easy thing to implement as an offering and would be a great middle ground between the useless map offerings that we have currently and the really good map offerings we used to have. Number 8, the luck status effect. Currently, this status effect is absolutely atrocious. Literally, the only thing that it does is it increases your chance of escaping from a hook. So if you try to Kobe, it'll be easier to do so. But most of the things that give you increased luck give you like an extra 1 or 2%. So the only time this is ever useful is if you're in a 4-man and everybody is using luck stuff, because then you can get to the point where you're pretty much guaranteed to Kobe off the hook. But that requires so much commitment from the entire team that I just don't think it's designed well. So instead, I have a bunch of proposals for things that the luck status could affect, and it could be any combination of these things. It doesn't necessarily have to be all of them. It could just be a couple, but it's just a bunch of ideas for what luck could affect that I think would make this game a lot more interesting. The first and most obvious one is increase the chance of getting a higher rarity item out of a chest. A lot of people have the misconception that luck already does this, so we may as well just implement that into the game. Most people don't even use chests anyway, so why not buff them in this way? The second idea is to increase the chances of receiving skill checks. Obviously, the more skill checks, the more progression. You could also increase the good skill check success zone, so you have less of a chance of missing your skill check. Another idea is to create a small chance of getting a critical skill check success zone, which is yellow and replaces the great skill check success zone, but is slightly smaller. So it's harder to hit, but if you hit it, you get an additional 3% progression. My next idea is to create a small chance of the survivors having some healing progress after being unhooked. So kind of like a mini resurgence, maybe somewhere in like the 10 to 20% range, and have it stack with resurgence to create some interesting synergy there. Another idea is to create a 1% chance every second while slugged, but fully recovered to give you a difficult skill check, like a DS skill check. And if you hit the skill check, you'll pick yourself up from the ground. Now, a 1% chance every second is extremely low, but this could not only be an interesting mechanic for luck, but could also be an interesting mechanic for how DBD is trying to implement their anti-slugging measures. I had this idea when I was watching my friend play Rust, because when you go down in that game, you have a certain percentage chance to get up. And I think this would be a really interesting thing for DBD, as long as it's a low enough chance to not make it guaranteed per se, but a high enough chance to make it happen every once in a while, which can create some insane plays. And my last idea is to create a 1% chance of fully countering a source of damage. Now again, 1% chance is tiny. Like theoretically, you'd have to be hit 100 times in that match for it to even proc. But if it does proc, that could be so cool and create some really interesting scenarios. My idea for this comes directly from Silksong with the dice and how that prevents you from taking damage every once in a while. I think this could be a really interesting thing for DBD as long as the chance is super low. But regardless, there's so many cool and unique ideas for making the luck status effect more interesting. So I think reworking it into a status effect that has at least some of these mechanics would make it a lot cooler. All right, let's do a speed run really quick of some really easy ones. Number 9, killer descriptions. Currently, a lot of the killer descriptions are super vague and super long, so sometimes it's very difficult to actually understand the killer power just by reading it. So I think that they should have video examples of the powers being used. Again, you could even outsource this to the community because I'm sure plenty of people would volunteer to do this for free. Like Behavior, if you're watching, feel free to email me. I would gladly record examples of every power just so that it makes it easier for new players, and I would do it for completely free. Number 10, we have ping icons. I can guarantee you most people don't actually know what these ping icons mean, so I think even having a setting to show the text of what it means too, such as like high ping versus packet loss, I think that would be super helpful. Number 11, useless items, offerings, and add-ons. There's so many of these things that people just will never ever touch ever in their life, so I think you should be able to sell them for blood points. This has been a highly requested feature since the game began, and I think people would love to be able to recycle things that they don't use for blood points, even if you don't get that many blood points in return. Number 12, seeing your perk loadout. As it stands right now, I don't really see the point of having your perk loadout in the top right of the lobby. Like you could just click one button and then see it there. So obviously, I think this should instead change into the perk loadouts of all of the other players in your lobby, or at least when you're in game and you press escape, then you can see the loadouts of the other players in your lobby. Because I'm pretty sure Behavior doesn't want to do this in the lobby because players would dodge people if they were using like Calm Spirit, Urban Evasion, and Self-Care, because I know I would. So maybe saving it for when you're actually in the game would be a better solution. And I do actually think that they're working on this behind the scenes, and having your own perk loadout is just kind of a test to eventually get to this feature. Number 13, the friends list. As it stands right now, the friends list could use a nice overhaul. It's super annoying to have to scroll through your friends list to find people, and when other people come online, it like completely messes it up and you have to keep scrolling again. So just like everything else in this game, we should really have filters, such as being able to sort by Steam or by console or by recently added or something. Adding a search bar would be huge huge and be super nice. And even adding a copy to clipboard button for your name and your code. I know the code is technically short, but if you have a long name, it would be really nice to be able to just copy to the clipboard and send it to people extremely quickly. All right, back to some more complicated ones. Number 14, we have boon perks. As it stands right now, I think boon perks could use a little bit of a buff because they're just barely ever used. So this is a random idea I had that would make them a little bit more interesting. For one, increase the range from 24 meters to 32 meters. The closer you are to the totem, the stronger the effects, but when you're further from the totem, the weaker the effects are. So first of all, this would make for some much more interesting dynamics because you'd get more benefits out of it for being closer to the totem, but it would also tone down the issue of verticality with boon perks, where the killer has to go super far out of their way to snuff the boon perks that are on a different level. So for example, from 0 to 8 meters, it's at its strongest. From 8 to 16 meters, it's a bit stronger. From 16 to 24 meters, that's like its normal area for what the perks currently are. But then from 24 to 32 meters, it's at its weakest. So let's take boon exponential, which normally gives you 100% increased recovery speed. We could make it so that from 32 meters to 24 meters, you get a 30% boost to recovery speed. From 24 to 16, you get like an 80% recovery speed. From 16 to 8, you get 130% faster recovery speed. And from 0 to 8 meters, which is basically touching the totem, you get 180% recovery speed. I think this would make boon perks a lot more interesting and make them have a much higher risk and higher reward situation where you get a better benefit by getting closer to the boon, which obviously means it'd be more likely that killers would, come to you and find the boon, while also still giving them some sort of benefit and a longer range, even if it's just a tiny benefit. Plus, if this ends up being too strong, you could always make it so that boons break when they're snuffed, and that would probably help even it out. And number 15 is going to invocation perks, which are another perk type that I just don't think is worth running. So my proposal for this is make it so that the perk gains tokens every time a generator is completed, and each token increases the effect, but increases the downside as well. So for example, with invocation weaving spiders, which is the perk that removes charges from gens when you finish the invocation, maybe without any tokens, it only makes you broken for 60 seconds, but only gives you like the 5 to 10 charges for the gens. But if you have 4 tokens, for example, so like you're in a 3 gen, then it'll take away 20 charges to every gen, but make you permanently broken and oblivious for the rest of the game. Obviously, this would need to be play tested and balanced, but just the general concept of the perks becoming stronger as the game goes on, except the downside becoming worse as well, would give you a really interesting dynamic to choose when and when not to use it. Plus, you can make progress on the invocation in the basement. So for example, if you want to like 99 it and then save the effect for when you reach an exact moment of the game, it could be super interesting. I really like things that are high risk, high reward, because I think it makes the game a lot more interesting, like hex perks, for example. So implementing a higher risk, higher reward thing for invocation perks would make them a lot more unique. Number 16, fog vials. I'm not gonna lie, I think fog vials got completely gutted when they nerfed them. So I wanted to give them a slight buff while not making them as oppressive as some people on Twitter like to think that they were. Gives the killer the brain fog status effect, which is a new status effect that suppresses auras and scratch marks. And while standing in the fog, you get permanent brain fog, and then it dissipates over 10 seconds after leaving the fog. Fog vials are meant to help in the stealthy playstyle, so I think being able to pop it and remove the auras and scratch marks even for 10 seconds after leaving the fog would make it a lot more interesting rather than just having the effects happen while they're in the fog as it currently is. Number 17 is going to maps. As it stands right now, I think maps are really bad unless you're extremely new to the game. So I think a nice little quality of life buff to them would be allowing you to go up to any objective and spend some time, maybe like, 12 seconds or something, to actually draw on your map and mark its aura permanently to you until that objective is completed. So yes, it'll take some time to actually do, which means you're not working on gens, but then you don't have to use charges to be able to see the aura. You could just see it whenever you want. I think this would be an extremely useful quality of life feature for maps to make them a little bit more useful even for higher level survivors. Plus they can have an add-on that makes it so that other teammates can also see these. So for example, if you want somebody to come help you with a gen, you could draw on your map and mark it so that your teammates know where to go. I think this is a super interesting thing to implement that'll make maps a little bit more useful. Number 18, chests. Although I don't think chests are as useless as people claim, realistically the only time they're useful is if you get a medkit out of them. So I have 2 proposals to make them a little bit more interesting. One, allow rummaging by default, which will give you a random add-on to the item that you're currently holding, as long as it has an empty add-on slot. And my other idea, which is probably something Behavior would never do, but I think it's super fun, and that's to have chest unique items that you cannot acquire outside of chests. So think of like the Vecna items that you can only get from Vecna chests. Something similar, but obviously less drastic. Stuff that you can't bring into the game, so it incentivizes people to actually search chests if they want to use these items. Plus, you could even make it so that you can actually take these items out of the trial if you escape with them. So it can give survivors an additional objective besides doing gens to try to get these exclusive items items out of the chests. It would almost turn it into like a very, very mild version of like an extraction shooter in a way. I think this would be really interesting, and if you have any ideas for what these chest unique items could be, feel free to put those in the comments below. Number 19, dual totems. As of now, if the killer doesn't have a hex perk and the survivors don't have a boon perk, dual totems are completely useless. Like, they don't even really give you that many blood points. So there's zero point in spending the time to cleanse them. So my idea to make dual totems actually integrated into the mechanics of the game would be that if survivors cleanse a dual totem, it reveals the aura of the killer to all survivors for 10 seconds, and all survivors can also see each other's auras for that duration. So this would be a really interesting way to be able to get some intel on where your survivors are and where the killer is, especially if you're solo queue, and would give a secondary objective for survivors instead of just doing gens. But it's completely optional, kind of like using the cameras against Springtrap, where yes, you're able to get some useful information, but there's also that trade-off of you not actually progressing the game. Plus, you can maybe make it so that killers can break dual totems and also get similar benefits, like seeing the auras of every survivor for 5 seconds or something. I think these changes to maps and chests and dual totems would just make every game feel so much more unique, because there's so many more things that you can do while being completely optional. It wouldn't interfere with the main gameplay loop of DBD, so players that are new don't even need to know about this yet, but it also increases the skill gap and increases the number of interesting situations that can happen in a game. Number 20, the 2v8 estimated queue time. Now, this is a wonderful feature. This is a fantastic feature. However, I do think that this should be in regular queues as well. I don't see why we can have a queue time for 2v8, but we can't for regular queues. I also think that they should have some sort of priority queue system like Overwatch, where if you play a specific role, then they will give you a priority queue ticket for the other role. So for example, if you want to play killer, but the killer queue times are extremely long, the game could offer you a priority queue ticket for playing a survivor match, which would give you a shorter queue for killer in the next match. I think this would help balance out queues overall, because it would incentivize more people to play the other role, especially when the role they want to play has a really long queue. It's basically an additional benefit to the blood point incentive. Number 21, bot loadouts. Currently, the bot loadout system is really bad because it applies the same loadout to every single bot in your custom lobby, but this should only apply individually to each bot and just have a toggle that says apply to all bots. I'm really surprised this isn't a feature already. Number 22, the kill switch. The kill switch is not a useless feature at all by any means, but it's useless when they don't use it. And I hope, Copium, that Behavior learned their lesson from the previous controversy where they didn't use their kill switch on things that were quite literally breaking the balance of the game. Like, for example, with the infinite toolbox glitch, but they didn't kill switch streetwise until everybody was complaining about it. I just think that their threshold for what is considered to break the game should include anything with a major bug or exploit, such as that infinite toolbox bug. Yes, it doesn't technically break the game in terms of like soft locking it, but it's still a significant balance issue caused by a bug, which in my opinion is worthy of using the kill switch feature. I know from a game dev perspective, they don't like using the kill switch feature. Like, for example, if you kill switch a killer that people like to play, but they were only able to play that weekend and they're not able to play their favorite killer, obviously they would be bummed about it. But I do think that that is a con that is significantly outweighed by the pros. So please, please, please use your kill switch feature more. It is like the one feature that helps the fact that this game has huge bugs every single update. Number 23, the character selection arrows. Now, the character selection arrows are not useless, but they're useless now because they don't even exist anymore. I don't know why they removed this. This was one of the most useful things. I used this constantly. The arrows to switch characters were so helpful because, like, for example, if you wanted to check characters that you had anniversary cakes on, you could go to the anniversary cake in one of your loadouts and then just go to the next character, and it won't remove any of the menus, and it'll be on the same page where the anniversary cakes are on. So you could basically keep spamming the switch character button until you see cake, so you know you can use that person. But now these arrows are completely gone, so you have to open up the characters tab, click on the character you want to go to, click on the loadout button, and then scroll to the page where the anniversary cakes are every single time you switch characters. It's so tedious and so annoying. So please, please just bring this feature back. Number 24, this is the prestige tax. I generally don't understand the point in having a prestige tax every time you want a prestige. You're already putting in like 1.3 million blood points to get to level 50. So why have another arbitrary amount for no reason? You should just be able to press the button to prestige and not spend any money. Number 25, perk levels. We've all had this discussion before, so I'll keep this brief. There's zero point in having perk levels nowadays other than to bloat the blood web so that people have higher playtime. From a game dev perspective, I think it's a completely valid reason, but 6 years ago, now there's so many perks in the game that it's enough to keep people grinding regardless. Removing the perk tiers would not only keep things simpler for new players because it's less to understand, but it would also keep things simpler for the devs because they wouldn't need to code in values for 3 separate tiers for every single perk, and they would no longer need to put things in the description like the 3/4/5 seconds, for example. Like, it would just be a great way to simplify the game, and I don't think there's a single person that would complain about this. Number 26, graphics presets. I still don't know why we're in the year 2025 and we only have 4 presets for for graphics, but cannot change individual settings such as shadow quality, anti-aliasing, texture quality, etc. There is not a single other game of this size that doesn't allow you to change these options. And you can already change these things individually in the game files, so it's not like it breaks anything. Plus, it doesn't even require that much coding effort. Like in Unreal, you could literally just have a button that's connected to a command line that changes it. You don't even need to do that much coding. Like obviously it's going to be more complicated in the actual game because there's so many more moving parts, but I feel like they're talented enough to figure it out just like every other single game in existence. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe if you're new, and let me know what your ideas would be in the comments below, and if there's any other useless features that I missed. If you want to see 150 insane DBD secrets that you didn't know about, feel free to click on this video here. I guarantee that you won't know a large majority of these.